Shelf Tour, Outlaw Bookseller, Royal Format Hardcovers, SF and Associational, and other stuff as well probably, but mostly SF. And these are the Royals, the large format hardcovers. In these shelf tours you don't get to see everything because in between my filming and posting them I'm always moving stuff around due to lack of space in the hideout, as I keep saying, and lack of space in the house per se. So things, you know, sometimes get missed. They'll move from one shelf to another. So even at the end of this, you won't have seen all my goodies. I've decided to do things like limited editions and oddities and what have you in a number of separate videos. So today we're going to be looking at 1, 2, 3, 4 levels of shelves. 2 of them are double stacked, so it's the equivalent of a whole IKEA bookcase or more. And if I break off, it's because the postman has knocked the door, the video has come home with something, so I might film this in 2 bits. So we'll have a look. A lot of these things you've seen before if you've been following the channel. Little cool artifact here. Penguin science fiction postcards, which is really, really nice, which I think you still get. And I think what I've done with mine is I've raided it and I've popped some of the postcards into the actual books, but I only get that out of the way, so because that's rather in the way. So we'll have a look at what we've got. There's also some bits of ephemera here on the top. Let's get these out of the way. So there's all sorts of bits of rubbish that I've accumulated, and we've got, look at this, what have we got here? There's me, front page of a paper doing a talk on 100 must-read books for men. And this is some local sort of, there you are, author looks at literature for the lads. Where is it? You get it in the frame. Come on now, Steve. There you go. And that's Midsummer Norton Library. That was my second gig there. I did one for the SF book and it was standing room only, and I'd only taken about 15 copies of the book along and I could have sold 50, and it was Glastonbury weekend. You know, this is 2006. And, you know, they sort of starved in Midsummer Norton. It was the most successful sort of thing I ever did on my book tours, though I did guest lecturing at universities and got big sort of turnout for that as well, of course. So anyway, so yeah, so what we got a bit of Aldous, which you probably will have seen before. Now some of this might be quite tight, so what I should do is pop something out. That's the Ballard folio I bought a while ago, did a video just about that, so we'll have a little look now. And yeah, a bit of all this, and these are mostly books I bought new, some second hand. And there's Dracula Unbound in Grafton, rather nice. It is a sequel to Frankenstein Unbound. It's not as good, Chris Foss cover, but it is worth a read. I should reread it one day. But Frankenstein Unbound is one of my favourite Alduses. And did I get him to sign this one? I met him a couple of times, and yeah, he was a really cool guy. You know, he's really sort of knowledgeable and funny and charming, and God, what a man he was. There you go. And I got quite a few signed Brians because I met him a couple of times, did an event with him in Swansea, which was great. He'd just come back from Kazakhstan and he came on wearing like a Kazakhstani sort of national costume or something with a strange bizarre wig type effect on his head, and that was great. And there's another signed one. It's Forgotten Life, one of his mainstream novels, Golax, wonderful book, really love that, great stuff. Actually, I'll show you this as well. This is Ruins, which is one of the Hutchinson novella series from the early 90s. They did loads of these, and again, it's mainstream, really, really nice. And that's another great one. I do like Brian's mainstream stuff. Then we have the first edition of House of Rumour by Jake Arnott. I think I covered that in my top 5, one of my top 5s, and that's an amazing book. And as I met Jake a few times, did an event with him back in 2017, I think it was. Great guy. And here's a book I really like, Nina Allen's The Silver Wind. This is the original edition. It's now been expanded and it's available in paperback from the lovely people of Solaris. And I actually prefer this shorter version. I feel it's more elegant, but Nina's stuff is great. And that's signed as well, probably because she's my mate. Oh, look, there's a promotional postcard for The Doll Maker, one of her other books. And let's see, I must have got it to sign this for me. Yeah, there you go, signed and dedicated with Dollmaker bookmark. There we are, 2019. That was the last time I saw her in the flesh, and we are going to do a video interview at some point, and I might do an event or something with her next year for the next book, which I've got a proof of. I think I mentioned that in a recent video. or you'll see it in upcoming collectors. Then there's some Asimov. I mean, I'm a sort of born again guy, and I'm a firm believer in reading the robot books first. This was the one that did it for me. It really broke through with that. I bought it from my friend Graham because he was having a clear out, and like me, he'd never been an Asimov guy, but these robot books, I love them, and people slag the later ones off, but I think they're really good. I love that one, and this one as well, Robots and Empire. And then, you know, I said I've done a video just about collecting these, so that's on the channel somewhere. But Prelude to Foundation, I really like that as well. And, you know, I do love Grafton. You know, they sort of like, you know, Grafton books in the 80s, just so beautiful. Absolutely love them. And I enjoyed that as well. And I do struggle with Foundation. Then there's Foundation Earth, which I've not read. I'll get onto it at some point when I'm in the mood. And yeah, but one of my favourite Grafton books, and I think I put this in my book 100 Must Read Books for Men, is this book by A.A. Attanasio, who's best known as an SF and fantasy writer, and best known for a book called Radix, which came out in the early 80s. And I remember reading it then, and God, absolutely blew me away. It's an amazing book. It's so sort of flavoursome and colourful and gritty and interesting. And this is a mainstream novel, arguably. And as it says, spellbinding saga of pirates and sorcery, love and revenge. And the blurb sort of compared it to a cross between Robert Louis Stevenson's Treasure Island and the mystical sort of drug-laden works of Carlos Castaneda, who I read a lot when I was young. And Wyvern, of course, is a dragon. And in this, the sort of dragon is a spiritual emblem. And it is about piracy, and it's a sweeping romantic epic. And it's a great book. I loved it. And I remember selling it a lot in trade paperback, because what they used to do then in the late 80s is you'd get a hardcover, simultaneous sometimes with the trade paperback. The hardcovers would probably get printed at 1,000. Sometimes they'd be 3 months before the trade if it was a more commercial author, say it was somebody like Raymond E. Feist. And then, you know, I would sell loads and loads of the trades, not so many of the hardcovers. And I remember, for some reason, one that stuck in my head is one of the later Anne McCaffrey Dragon books. And I can't think which one it was, and that was a Corgi Trans World trade, and I sold 65 copies, you know, which doesn't sound like a lot, but it is a lot for a trade paperback. Here's an Attanasio I picked up in Hay recently, Solace, not read that yet. And then we move onward a little bit. What have we got? Here's an uncommon book. This is about a 4th or 5th printing, and you know, The Wind-Up Girl by Paolo Bacigalupi, and he's never sort of replicated the success of this, and people love this, and I like it. I think it's very well written. I do think it's too long, but you know, it really has been a real bestseller the last 10 years or so, and it's done really well. It's very, very beautiful there. And it sort of reminded me of the sort of thing that Ian MacDonald was doing, things like River of Gods back in the 90s and what have you. And yeah, one of the more notable recent SF novels of our time. And he's mostly done YA books, and he's never really sort of risen to this height again. So, you know, maybe we'll see. But I will admit I've not read the others. Probably time now to move the camera. I'm aware the light isn't fantastic today, but it is the autumn and I shoot in natural light, so it is what it is. Well, there's a lot of ballad here, and you will have seen those in my ballad collections videos, so if you haven't, do watch them because you'll get a full run through on those. And this is an important book for me, and this is Clive Barker's Weave World, first edition, which is a fantasy novel, and it was absolutely huge at the time when it came out. And this came out in 86, and let me just see. And this was Clive's second novel, 87, and this was sort of like early 87, spring, summer, and absolutely beautiful. I'm afraid the spine is faded. I used to have a Weave World mug, which was an official one, and I sold it to somebody on eBay, and it got broken in the post. It's a shame because they're uncommon, but and this is a great fantasy novel. It's big and chunky, lovely, lovely jacket. Clive was really cooking then, and I'm sorry this is so shiny, but isn't that beautiful? And it's about a whole world contained in a carpet, and text blocks a bit brown because of the paper stock, but there you go, great stuff. And you know, he was really sort of doing it there, and I heard him read at the Worldcon 87, and he was great, you know, really, really good. And I think probably my favourite things by him are some of the short stories and Books of Blood, and he really sort of hit the nail on the head with the one which was in Night Visions 3, the anthology, and that was The Hellbound Heart, which of course was filmed as Hellraiser, which still stands up today. And I used to have a copy, a UK first of Night Visions 3, and it was all stories by Barker and Lisa Tuttle and Ramsey Campbell. And I sold it. It was signed by George R. R. Martin. He signed it for me when I met him. It was mint. I should have kept it, really. There you go. Neil J. Barrett's Through Darkest America, important post-apocalyptic novel. Then we come on to the very wonderful Barrington J. Bailey, The Sinners of Erspia. And this is a Cosmos Wildside hardcover, so a print-on-demand one from about 12 years ago. And I've not read this because, of course, Bailey's dead. I love his work. I have saved a couple up for a rainy day for when I'm really in the mood. I think I've got 3 I haven't read, and there are 2 that I can't find them after. The Seed of Evil in the full-length version, which is a short story collection, and the Star Virus I don't have either, I don't think. They're sort of quite uncommon. But yeah, look at that fantastic Bosch type cover there. Really, really nice. Cosmos Wildside, a lot of print-on-demand stuff, but they did some nice jacketed stuff as well. And, you know, they're good guys, you know, so they must be supported. They lost Keith Roberts reprints. Peter S. Beagle I showed you a while ago. Then we get a bit of Greg Bear. And I think something that my friend Graham and I talked about, we talked about showing you some more things from his collection in depth, and we might do some author focuses. And he's got a fantastic collection of Greg Bear books. And I am trying to grow mine, actually, and this is short stories. And interestingly, this is a US one from Warner, and I bought this a few years ago, and I don't think I got that from, I think I might have got it from Cold Tonnage. Let's have a look. Oh, from Find Edition. And yeah, quarter cloth there and red boards, really, really nice. And this isn't too expensive in hardcover. You can get, there's different editions obviously, and it's 9 short stories. But that cover art was used on Eon, I think in the UK. As I say, this is a US first, so it's probably a world first. But lovely. I've not read that, so I must get around to that. Another Greg Bear in my collection, which has got a Jim Burns jacket, publishing legend there, is Slant. And really, really like that cover. I do love Jim Burns' stuff. And as I've said before, Jim doesn't live too far away, so one day I must see if I can get an interview with him, because we're sort of chummy online, and cool guy, obviously, the greatest SF artist ever. So let me just slide that back in. To end this shelf, but not quite, is America City by the very wonderful Chris Beckett, who for me is one of Britain's finest living SF writers. Chris is about 61. Once I can get the camera thing sorted out for a better webcam and a mic, I think I'll try and interview Chris online. We are in contact now and again. Heck of a nice guy. We did an event together back in 2017, which was for this book actually, and you will have seen probably in the background of the hideout this sort of posters and show cards for it. And well, look at that. I've still got the there's the AI sheet from Corvus, Advanced Information, which of course only comes to booksellers. And yeah, we had a good night. That was a great night. And oh, there's my flyer, which I produced for the evening, and dedication in there. And Chris is a really nice guy, you know, it's really good. This is a sort of situation about near future. Well, it's not that near, it's about 100 years from now, and a lot of people see it as a comment on Trump. I think that's a fair view, but it's about a pugnacious right-wing American president who gets involved with some strange things. And the main protagonist is a woman who, she sort of goes into becoming like his media secretary, because the money's good, but ethically that's a bit of a problem. But yeah, I mean, Chris Beckett for me is one of the greats at the moment. He's up there. And finally, tucked in this little shelf, that's a little William Burroughs chapbook, and I think there's only 25 of these, and that's signed by Burroughs as well. It's the only signed thing by Burroughs I've got. I never met him. He's one of my favourite writers. I always wanted to, but you know, he was never in the UK at the time, and he was getting old and what have you. So that's the first shelf. There we go. Royals, shelf 2, and what do we have? Well, more Chris Beckett. I have shown this before, I'm sure. That's The Holy Machine in hardcover, and that's Cosmos Wildside. And this is my favourite cover for this book. It's my favourite Beckett book. I think it's really uncompromising and sharp, and it's about AI, sex robots, a world where there's only one secular state, and it's a really great book, and I love it. It's available in paperback. Chris agrees with me that this is the best cover this book's ever had. I know he's very fond of it. Marvelous stuff. I did get that second hand. It was really cheap, which was fantastic. And at some point I feel I should do something about Chris's work, because it is really good. And I did a very short sort of review, very early days of the channel, of his most recent book. I'm hoping there'll be something else out soon, which is Tomorrow. And that's, you know, he's in quite an experimental phase now, and more like Christopher Priest than anything else, but he's got his own unique voice, and he's really good, you know. And Arthur C. Clarke Award, and you know, he's somebody who's not talked about enough. Is these flashy space operators, but Beckett is something that's got real sort of good, solid post-new wave literary SF writer with serious things to say, and he can do the strangeness and the world building as well, which he does in his Dark Eden trilogy, none of which I have in hardcover. But and then, you know, I think I've shown this, I've done a video just about this book. That's Ancient of Days by Michael Bishop. Great novel, great man. My contacts with him, never met in person, he's always been lovely. Blaylock's Land of Dreams, and I got that in Hay recently. Then, you know, some William Burroughs. I'm a huge Burroughs fan, have been for decades and decades, and that's the first of his second trilogy, that's Cities of the Red Night. And I remember reading that in my bedsit in 1985 when I first moved to Bath. And while I was reading it, it was on a Sunday, and I developed a fever and I was nauseous, and it was early 86 actually, I think, is one of the two, and it's all about a disease. And I've reread this in recent years, and it's a fantastic book. And the second one in that sequence, which is one of my very favourite Burroughs books, is his science fiction western, The Place of Dead Roads, which is just fantastic. And that's a Calder UK first, and some of these are signed by John Calder, because I knew John Calder. He was one of the two top avant-garde publishers in post-war Britain. At some point he was actually repping his own books. He was driving around the country selling his own books, and he was sometimes treated appallingly by some booksellers, but not, you know, I never saw that happen. And me and my colleagues, we revered him, and he was a great guy. You know, he did important work, and this is a fantastic sort of time travel Western SF book. It's really hard to describe, but it's one of my favourites. Really great stuff. I do love that. It's so fantastic. Burroughs is so important in the development of new wave SF and influencing things. Samantha Carter, and we've got a first, I think I showed this in the last one, because this was the sort of thing that's moved on here. That's Ender's Game revised edition, so that's the second edition first. This is David Cronenberg's only novel in the first edition, Consumed. I'm a massive Cronenberg fan. This isn't really a genre novel, it's rather like one of his films which doesn't cross over into SF. I must say it was delayed for years. It was about 2 years late coming out, and there were obviously some issues with it, with the writing or the editing or what have you. And I must admit I was disappointed by that. You know, it never really sort of caught fire for me. But I do regard Cronenberg as a writer first and a filmmaker second, because his films are so well written. It's all about the dialogue, and you know, his SF films are just the best SF films ever as far as I'm concerned. There's a bit of PK here, and I'll show you more of these when I do a when I do a Philip K. Dick sort of mainstream novels thing. And this is Gather Yourselves Together. This is one of the more uncommon ones. This is a trade edition, and gosh, I bought that many years ago, and this I think is his second or third mainstream novel, and this is about communism. And it's interesting reading the very early ones, the first 2 or 3 mainstream novels, because his style hasn't come together, and it's very, very interesting reading, because you're seeing him before he develops his voice, which is just fascinating. Really, really is quite something. Tom Dish's The Priest, bit of Harlan Ellison. I'm just going to show you this. There's going to be an Ellison video on 9 coming up, because I love Harlan. He was the greatest. This is the fairly recent Subterranean Trade edition of Blood's a Rover, which collects the all the material that he wrote about Vic and Blood, the sort of Solo and his dog of the post-apocalyptic future. And I mean, if you've never read A Boy and His Dog, you know, you are still, quite frankly, a novice as an SF reader. I mean, it's been hard to get his stuff for years because he hasn't dealt with mainstream publishers. He's no longer with us, sadly, but A Boy and His Dog for me is the finest post-apocalyptic story ever. It contains its prequel, Eggsucker, which was first published in the Savoy book in the UK. There's also the screenplay for, you know, what was going to be the film, and I'm glad it never happened, really. And it's one of those things, Ellison really wasn't up for writing novels, and I don't usually buy Subterranean because they're kind of fakes, really. They're always reissues of things. They don't do a lot of original work. They're just sort of, you know, dealing with Johnny-come-lately collectors. But it is really nice to have this in hardcover. But then, of course, I've got lots of Ellison originals in hardcover. To move on to Subterranean again, so after slagging them off, this is nice. This is Philip Jose Farmer's The Venus on the Half Shell and Others. Now, if you don't know Venus on the Half Shell, now Venus on the Half Shell was published under the name Kilgore Trout. And of course, Kilgore Trout is the fictional science fiction writer who is in Kurt Vonnegut's books. And if you can get hold of Venus on the Half Shell, I mean, I read it first time back in the 80s. It was a Grafton. It's very, very like Sirens of Titan. Now, Sirens of Titan, of course, is a massive influence over the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. And Subterranean did this a few years ago. There were a few Farmer omnibuses which came out shortly after his death, edited by devotees. And there's some great stuff in this. There's lots of stuff. Aside from the book itself, there's the short story, The Obscure Life and Hard Times of Kilgore Trout, The Jungle Rot Kid on the Nod. I mean, I've got pretty much all of these everywhere else. And it's got The Adventure of the Peerless Peer, which is his Wold Newton Sherlock Holmes story. But that's just really nice. And I'll show you my copy of Venus on the Half Shell at one point, the paperback. But yeah, so very, very nice. I find Farmer's marginalia to be his more interesting material I've usually found. So we need to move the camera now. Right, so this is a fantasy novel, Sorcery Rising, published by Earthlight in the late 90s by Jude Fisher. And it's got rather Robin Hobb-esque jacketing now, because Jude Fisher is my friend Jane Johnson, who is the major lady at HarperCollins Voyager. We first met way, way back in '89, and we don't see each other very often. We are in touch online. She's a great lady, and she also writes books under her own name. She wrote all those sort of Tolkien film tie-ins about the making of the films, and she has looked after Tolkien's legacy. Initially in Unwin, which is when I first met her, and then Unwin were bought by HarperCollins, and you know, that's been her thing. But I've not actually ever got around to reading this, but I got this as I do like, if I read fantasy, I'm usually a one volume and I'm out guy, so I've got that for a rainy day. Bought that a couple of years ago, and I get her to sign it for me when I see it at some point. I'm hoping one day to do an event with her, and I'm sure at some point we'll get to do an interview. And here's a nice book. I mean, this is Uncommon in Good Nick, and this is Mary Gentle in Gollancz, and this is Ancient Light. And that always reminds me of Hawkwind. There's a line in Spaces Deep from Do Re Mi Fa Sol La Ti Do, their third album, which is about beyond the realms of ancient light, which always sounds very Zelazny-esque to me, and it's a sequel to Golden Witch Breed. Beautiful. Looks like a fantasy novel, but these are SF novels, and they do have a certain sort of Legan sort of legacy feel about them, but absolutely beautiful. You know, they don't make them like that. Look at that wonderful illustration. Super. And we'll just nip that in there. Apart from another Mary Gentle there, the rest of this shelf is pretty much dedicated to the wonderful William Gibson. Now, I have a complete collection of hardcover first editions by Gibson, UK editions, signed by the great man himself, from our various meetings over the years. I think I've met Gibson, let me see, I've got to think, 1, 2, 3, I think it's 4 times. And one of those times I got to hang out with him properly, and that was the Design Museum in '93 for the launch of Virtual Light. This is the 10th anniversary edition of Neuromancer, and this is actually quite scarce. And I know Andy at Cold Tonnage had one, and he sold one a while ago for a few £100. And this is my reading copy. I've read this one loads and loads of times. I've got my first Grafton edition. There's a really good little introduction in here. There was an Ace equivalent of this, which is a Demi, but that apparently is more common, but it's a nicer book than this. But yeah, so, but as is, I might move that on one day for space, because, you know, it's, I say, I've got a Gollancz first, you know, which I don't keep on site, that's somewhere secure. And you know, this is like one of my favorite books. I read it most years. I get something out of it every time. I must have read it probably, I say most years, I read it most years now. I didn't in the early years. I read it a couple of times in the 80s. In recent years, I've probably read it another 10 times, and I find it sort of more or less perfect, and I love it. I get something different out of it every time, and you know, it is just quite something. And cyberpunk, you know, people go on about cyberpunk, but there isn't much real cyberpunk. There's Gibson, there's Sterling, there's John Shirley, there's a few other things, and once you get past about 87, you know, it's done really. There's a lot of sort of Johnny come latelys, but that's great. And speaking of Virtual Light, and as I say, it was at the launch of Virtual Light that I got to hang out with Bill a bit, and he was a cool guy, very nice. And I was invited along because at that time I was running a mail order thing. We did a signed first editions book club, and I got an invite from the lovely people at Viking Penguin, and I read the book in proof, and there's all sorts of stuff in here. Let's have a look. So I got this postcard, information is power, as we shine, and he signed that for me. That's the actual invitation. The Design Museum, Shad Thames, 29th of September, and I think this is 93, and as you see it's got my name on it, handwritten on, so I got invited along, got Gibson signed it for me, invited by Marion at Viking, which was great. And there's all sorts of sort of AI stuff in here. That's advanced information, not artificial intelligence. Got nice end papers, and let's see, dated, there you go, the 30th of the 9th of 93, which I think was a publication date. So yeah, and he was great, and we got to hang out, and he introduced me to Polly Tapson, who was the sort of maker of the film of the Gernsback continuum, which is called Tomorrow Calling. And Tomorrow Calling is really good. It's about 10 minutes long. It was on Channel 4 once in about 94. I VHS taped it. It's now an extra on it's certainly on the German Blu-ray of Johnny Mnemonic, and there might be some other things. If you can get to see it, do. It's probably online. But yeah, I need to reread the Bridge trilogy because it's been a long time. The next time I met Bill was for he was doing a tour a couple of years later for Edoro, which is great book. And there you go. And I had all sorts of ephemera for this as well. Like I say, these are all signed, and this I was sent a floppy disk with this. You know, an old-fashioned floppy disk, you know, that you would slot into your PC. And there's a publicity photo of Gibson, which I got from Viking. And I used this when I edited a literary diary in 98, and it was published, it was a diary from 1999, and I put a Gibson quotation in there, it's signed there as well. And that event was in Bristol, and he was on form there, and he signed a lot of stuff for me again. And I didn't see him again then for a very long time, until just before the pandemic, when he did a tour for the last book, the latest book. And you know, he's knocking on now, isn't he? No, he's in his 70s. All tomorrow's parties there, and again, as I say, this one, let's see, again, that's signed, and I think I got that one from, I used to run the signed first editions book club for a big book selling company, and even though I wasn't running it by that point, I still had friends. I think Graham was still there because we worked together. That's a signed first hardcover of the screenplay of Johnny Mnemonic. There's a postcard in there, and then I sort of come on to really my second favourite trilogy, which is this is the first one in the Blue Ant series, and this is Pattern Recognition, and this is just such a wonderful book. And if you've not read Blue Ant, I actually think Blue Ant overall is his best trilogy. The books get better each one. I mean, this is fantastic, and then there's Spook Country and Zero History, and they're just wonderful. And they're not science fiction, they're mainstream novels, but they show how the contemporary world that we live in is science fictional, and they're just great, and I want to talk about them at some point. And again, this is signed as well. Lovely. So that's a bit of Gibson. I've already talked about the rest of the Blue Ant trilogy. There's Spook Country, Zero History. These are just fantastic books. I mean, you know, once you've read these, you look at what else is around, and oh gosh, there's not really a lot of comparison. And yeah, we're into the sort of the new trilogy here, the Peripheral, which is really sort of strikingly original and strange book. And of course there's that Amazon TV series which is on now, which is just, quite frankly, it's rubbish. It really is. It's so childish and dumbed down. You know, it doesn't have that thing which I talk about, which is the cognitive estrangement. You know, it doesn't have that. And let's try and get the camera sorted. And you know, this is what you want. You know, you pick this up, and even if you're a Gibson sort of fanatic like I am, you think, wow, you know, what's going on here? This is quite strange, and it's got very great high concept stuff, but it doesn't really translate the TV series. Here's Agency, and this was, to say, the last book that I got signed by Gibson, and he did the tour just before the pandemic got going in early 2020, and this is a edition which Blackwell did with the stars there on the text block, and is pre-signed, so I didn't have to take this along to the event, which was good. but because it was Blackwell, I couldn't get staff discount on it, so I was rather peeved with that. But there you go. Great stuff. I guess the third one will come, and maybe that'll be the lot, you know, but we'll see, you know. But he's sort of so seminal. Joe Haldeman's 1968, also known as War Year. Some M. John Harrison I've shown you before. These are all first. This is a first of light. And Mike has a new book out next year, which is autobiographical. I mean, you talk about space opera, and you can talk about Vernor Vinge, you can talk about all sorts of people, but quite frankly, when Mike did Light and Nova Swing and Empty Space, you know, these sort of, you could almost feel him swaggering and saying, you know, this is, oh yeah, really, you're going to sort of claim to be better at space opera than me? Well, just see this, and look at that Nova Swing and Empty Space, and these are just fantastic, and they do mess with your head. It's great stuff, it really is. And I got Mike to sign all those to me last time I saw him, and I do hope I'll do an event with him again, because we had such a long time. It was 89 and 2017, very long time in between. I did see him in between at one point, and I'd met him before those as well. But great stuff. And again, one of my favourite living writers, Christopher Priest, William Gibson, M. John Harrison. They are sort of my remaining living idols, really, you know, the sort of new wave masters, just great guys. So what else do we have? This is a sort of local book, really. This is from Wizards Tower Press, who are based in Bristol, and I don't think they're active anymore. And this is Winter Song by Colin Harvey, who was a Bristol-based SF writer who's dead. And I bought this because I've not actually read it yet, but I thought it was just beautiful, and they did lovely books. And Colin Harvey briefly had a bit of a hit. There was a book called, what the life of me, what was it called? Good grief, I can't think what it was called now. And it sort of very briefly went into the charts, and I remember selling it, and I can't for the life of me think what it's called. I'll stick it up the screen and say that Wizards Tower local. And there's an introduction to this by Gareth Powell. If you don't know what Gareth Powell is, he's one of the sort of top British space opera writers, and his Embers of War series is being made into a Netflix serial, so he'll soon be really famous. I've never met him. He actually came and did an event at the shop I work in, but I was on holiday, so my friend Claire hosted it, and she said he was great. He was with M.R. Carey, Robert Holdstock. I think I need to move the camera really at this stage, don't I? Right, that's better. More Robert Holdstock, some Jita Noir, my old chum Lee Kennedy, wonderful lady, great writer, Saint Hiroshima. That's the UK version. The US one has different text, so I must pick up. Here's a trade in here, and I've kept this as a trade because this is Lagan, obviously, Always Coming Home. This is a Grafton trade paperback. I prefer the trade paperback to the hardcover, because the hardcover is Golax and it's very plain black, yellow and silver. This is much nicer. This is the period in which I think Norman Spinrad said she got into sort of eco-fascist mode, and you know, and that's Norman for you, you know, always contentious but a great guy. So there we are. And sort of world building and sort of a little bit woo-woo as far as I'm concerned, to be quite honest, but beautiful book. Le Tellier's The Anomaly, one of my sort of books of the year, in hardcover this year. Beautiful Lem there. There's a Stanislaw Lem video on the channel, you check that out. It's called The Problem of Knowledge, and I'm so very interested in Lem's work, and beautiful MIT edition there. Here's somebody who's got a new book, or two new books out. One's just come out, one came out in December. It's Cormac McCarthy. That's the first edition of The Road in Picador, which I read cover to cover and couldn't put down. I think it's astonishing. Great SF novel. The new one hasn't had great reviews apparently, but it's a mainstream novel. Richard Morgan, Market Forces, what I think is his best book. There's First of Black Man, which has now been retitled 13, presumably because somebody thinks there's something wrong with this title and it's politically incorrect. But you know, that's the silliness of the way things are now. And this was Richard's last book. He's due for a new one really, and that's Thin Air. And obviously he's done okay with two series of Altered Carbon on Netflix, and that's one which is set on Mars, and I think this is signed as well. Let me have a look. So no, it's not. I've never met Richard. I would like to, because he's got bags of attitude. He deserves his popularity, which is good. So finally on this shelf, I think I've shown this in a book haul. That's The City Not Long After by Pat Murphy, and again in a pan hardcover, very pretty. So there you go. We've got N to R here, and I've moved these up from the shelf below, and apologies for the glare, but so, as I say, you know, I've done moving stuff and you don't get to see things. So sort of things which have been listing on the top. There you go, look at that. There's Michael Moorcock, The Whispering Swarm there. UK first edition. I did have an American first, but I prefer the UK cover, and it's got lots of great autobiographical stuff in this. I was less keen on the fantasy stuff, but I think I just want Mike to write this autobiography, really, so that's probably what it was. So, and I mean, this is the sort of thing, yeah, you know, I've got lots of things like this sitting around. That's the Space Trilogy by C.S. Lewis in an omnibus, that sort of stuff. But let's have a look what we got here. So, right, Larry Niven, my God. Larry Niven, for me, complete nostalgia. I used to sort of sell tons of Niven in the 80s, and here's Footfall, and this is the American Del Rey first, which is got the silliest jacket in the universe, but let's be honest, isn't that fantastic? And I used to sell tons of these. I used to stack them high. Marvelous stuff. And this is one I've not read. Niven, Pornell and Flynn, Falling Angels, and I bought this because I love the jacket, and it's Pan, and you don't get many Pan hardcovers. Pan hardcovers are Macmillan usually, and I thought, well, I'm having that because it looks really good, and there you go. So that was bought purely because it was beautiful and because it was cheap. So there you go. And here's a book which caused a splash in the early 90s. It was a paperback original from Sort of Books. Manchester, they did 4 books, and this is Vert by Jeff Noon. Jeff Noon's done some good stuff since then, you know, he's a good guy. And this reminded me of the time when I read it. When I read it, it reminded me of the Jerry Cornelius books by Michael Moorcock. And I sort of thought, well, you know, I sort of been there, done that. But it is a great sort of like psychedelic post-cyberpunk book. And this is the American First from Crown. And I don't have the paperback UK First anymore. It sort of went on the not on the burner, but it went out in a clear out. So there you go. But that's good. So I reread some Noon recently and enjoyed it. So his recent crime novel, Slow Motion Ghosts, that was fantastic. Really enjoyed that. So we'll come on to that at some point as well. I've got that here somewhere. For the life of me, I can't see what it is. But there you go. That's the hideout for you. Here's an uncommon book. Now, I would like the Ace hardcover original, and what I'd really like is the Orange Quarter Leather Limited. But this is Tim Powers on Stranger Tides. Grafton, UK, uncommon book even in this edition. I used to sell this in trade paperback, loads and loads and loads of it. And of course, it's Zombie Pirates. And of course, On Stranger Tides was used as the subtitle of one of the Pirates of the Caribbean films. Now, the rumour is that Tim Powers got $500,000 because they used the title, because the whole sort of thing with that Disney franchise, as these things are laughingly called, is a lot of the ideas, you know, I would say, I can't really bear to watch them, I don't think they're very good films, but the ideas to me seem to come from On Stranger Tides, you know, which is just great. So lovely, beautiful Grafton hardcover, you know, they don't make them like that anymore. It's not gorgeous. But the Ace one's got a fantastic jacket as well, and I hope to pick one of those up one day. But Tim is very, very collectible, World Fantasy Award winner. I think he's a good writer. I don't think he's as good as everybody says. I mean, my money would go to sort of Jeter, out of the sort of California dreamers who coalesced around Philip K. Dick. I mean, he knew Philip K. Dick. There was him, K.W. Jeter, James Blaylock. I mean, for me, Jeter is the man. I mean, Blaylock's really inventive and original, but wow, Jeter is the man. Then there's some things by Chris Priest here. This is, and I think I might have covered these in another video, but that's Real Time World in the Grim Grin edition, which is Chris's own press. He started this some years ago and just sort of wanted to reissue some of his early work and issue some stuff which had never been published. And let's see, there is a paperback of this, and there's a letter in there from Chris to me from Hastings, 2008. Got longer ago. He's no longer living at that address. He lives in Scotland now, not Hastings. And there's a paperback edition, and I did the blurb for the back cover of the paperback, so there you go. One to watch out for, particularly if you've never an early priest, is Ursat's Wines. A lot of this is sort of instructive short stories, so there was stuff in this which had never been published before, so that's great. It's a great one. There's Chris on the back in his youth, and you know, again, there'll be an interview with Chris once I get the whole webcam thing sorted out. So it can be, I could do it now, but the quality wouldn't be very good, and I want to do the quality, so I'm trying to sort of save some of the money up that I'm getting from Super Thanks and from the channel to sort of invest in better tech, so I can talk to these people, because I know quite a few SF writers, and the thing is that I'm not a fan sort of guy. I don't go to conventions and stuff like that very often, and they usually live in different parts of the country to me, but I can always talk to them on on sort of online, so we'll do that at some point. This is weird because this is it always baffles me. This is the first edition of The Quiet Woman from 1990, and when Chris was writing this, he told me it was going to be called Explanations, and there were going to be links to the affirmation. And this is a brilliant book. This is the only one of his books that I've bought which isn't signed, and I never got him to sign it for me, probably because I thought he already signed it for me, but that's a great one. So there we go. There you go, the Prestige World signed first, limited edition, not limited edition, this signed, there's a letter in there from Chris to me, and yeah, let's see, dedicated to my good self. And of course this is one that became the film, and still a very collectible book now. I remember selling it really strongly, actually. When it came out, I was running a bookshop in Swansea. I opened Swansea's biggest ever bookshop, which is still there. I ran it for a year. I wasn't really happy there. I want to come back to the West Country, and I remember selling 20 odd in hardcover, which was really good. I mean it doesn't sound like a lot, but when you actually work in the trade, you realize how few some books sell. It's just important. And lots more Priest, as you see there. The Extremes, all of these are signed. Separation, The Islanders, The Adjacent. The last time Chris and I met in person was to do an event in Bath for The Adjacent, and that's there. And these are all fantastic, and there will be videos about these specifically coming up. Interesting one there, The Separation. That's the first hardcover, but it's not the first edition. The first edition was a Simon & Schuster trade paperback, and that sort of marked the end of Chris's relationship with him, really, because for a novelist of his stature not to get a hardcover, and it was reprinted really quickly, and by the time I picked it up it was in the second printing. So Gollancz then took him on and did a proper hardcover to show their commitment to him, which is great. So there's an example of a hardcover appearing after a paperback. So that's the sort of first thus, really, but that's the one the collectors go for. A lot more here. So as you see, a lot of Priest, because he's my favorite living SF writer, and he's my mate as well, as I've said. So there you go. The rest of this shelf is all Adam Roberts, and I've never met Adam. I got in touch with him once to talk about doing an event, and then I think the pandemic struck, and he lives in London, of course, and I was slow on the uptake with Adam. I didn't read his stuff till a few years after things started to appear, and he does about a book a year, and I think I've got all his proper SF novels. He's done lots of parodies and stuff, and and they're good. And I've read, let me see, I've read those there. I've got some I haven't read yet. I've not read some of the ones at the end. I've read Salt on Stone. Stone's a really good one. Salt made quite a splash when it came out, and these are all firsts, and this is in the Broderick and DiFilippo 101 SF book, and that's a good one. It's quite a serious one. And what Adam set out to do, he said he's going to write a book on every major SF theme, and he's getting through it. And Stone, I really like this one. There's wonderful moments where the central character, who is a criminal who is taken on to assassinate somebody on another planet, they travel between planets in a spaceship, but it sounds like a foam that's exuded from the body and hardens around it. Brilliant. And he really is good, fellow of the Royal Society of Literature, and I hope to meet him one day. So maybe I'll try and get an interview with him. And Polystorm's an unusual one. This was the first one I read, The Snow, which is like a catastrophe novel. And I remember Chris Priest really sort of did a negative review of it, but I know Chris now thinks Adam's fantastic, and he is really good. So, and this is a strange one. This is Swiftly. Now Adam has written 2 books called Swiftly, and this is short stories, but there's also a novel called Swiftly as well, and that's sort of literary daring do for you. This is the sort of thing that the Nicholas Royals do on The Quiet. After some Adam Roberts, some more Adam Roberts. Let me just get the framing right and try and get the tie. I need to pull this camera back, I think. Let's see what we can do. Hang on. Sorry about the judder. There we are. So lots more Adam, as you see. Yellow Blue Tibia. I sell this book all the time at work, and great stuff, about a fake alien invasion sort of made up of the Soviets, which was really, really good. And I think it was Kim Stanley Robinson said, better than any Booker Prize winner, should have won the Booker Prize, that sort of thing. And I mentioned Swiftly, the short story collection. There's Swiftly, the novel. There you go. Isn't that beautiful? And New Model Army by Light Alone. I sell loads of this one as well at work, tons and tons and tons. And yeah, they're really beautiful, these Gollancz ones. Jack Glass, which I think was one of his award winners, and this is sort of a combination of SF novel and you know, traditional body in the library cozy crime thing. Isn't that beautiful? I sell lots of that as well. Here's a favourite, 20 Trillion Leagues Under the Sea. This is a funny book, and it's about people in a submarine which goes down, you know, 20,000 leagues and just keeps going and keeps going, and that's fantastic. So Betty, which is kind of his animal rights book sort of thing, and then there's the Real Town Murders series, which isn't two of. And, you know, it's funny, sort of around about that time, Gollancz also did The Thing Itself, which is my favourite book by him, which they did as a paperback original, and it was his best book for ages. I mean, they're all good, but that was the best one. And they really dropped the ball on that, you know, and it's a real shame. So I get the feeling they might have tried to edge him towards a series with these. There's no sign of a third one, so, you know, we'll see what happens. I think he would prefer probably to do singletons. I certainly would prefer to do that as well. Perkstreet Mount from about a year and a half ago, and This, which has been one of my favourite books this year, which should be out in paperback very soon. By the time I post this up, it should be, so do pick it up. It's really ambitious, and there is a review of it a few months ago on the channel. There's a video called Contemporary SF Book Reviews or something like that, and that's really, really great one. So time to move the camera again. Final shelf for the Royals, and some of these you'll have seen before. This is my Tom Toner Amaranthine collection. There's a video just about these on the channel. There's the first. These are all signed and dedicated to me with silly messages by Tom, because he's my mate and he lives nearby. So, and you know, he's great anyway, really good, inventive writer. So, you know, a lot more original than a lot of the people around today. Great stuff. So it's those. You've seen these Jack Vances recently. I don't normally have limited editions on this shelf, but I've got those Underwood Miller ones there because I've got the space, funny enough. So there you go. And that's my First of the Dying Earth. So it's this, Lyonese 3. I'm looking for decent copies of 1 and 2 of this. And of course, this is Grafton again. Grafton didn't do hardcovers of these in the UK. Gollancz did an omnibus about 15 years ago, which is now like hen's teeth. It's in black faux leather, which is nice, but it doesn't really suit those books, I don't think. And, you know, they were Underwood Miller ones, but I just want a couple of decent, you know, Grafton B format ones. I didn't buy at the time. I'm trying to find them in good nick. Well, forget it, you know, it's like impossible. Then we've got Cadwell Chronicles there. And then we've got the old diptych there, the diptych of Firefall, which is basically, we know what this is, don't you know what this is? This is Blind Sight and Echopraxia in one volume, and this is just about still in print. This isn't a first, actually. I normally only have first, but this is a reprint. So as I got that a little while ago after I realized it was out there, I missed it somehow. I don't know how that happened. So there you go. So moving again, we'll go handheld just for a second and get this corner revealed. Right, so what have we got? This is an interesting one. Donald E. Westlake, also known as Richard Stark, also known as Kurt Clark, also known as Tucker Coe, Edwin West. There's probably more. He wrote 100 books. He was an amazing crime writer. Under the name Kurt Clark, he wrote some science fiction. There's a novel called Anna Chaos, which is actually in this. This is Mysterious Press, USA. So it's got his little short novel Anna Chaos, which is a crime novel set on a planet where everybody's a criminal, and also short stories. And this isn't bad, actually. And I love Westlake. He was absolute genius. He really was. His Parker novels are the finest heist novels ever written, and he is in my top 2 crime writers of all time. Is he number 1? Is he number 2? Let's just say my top 2 are him and the very wonderful Charles Willeford, who is just the master. I've got a Charles Willeford down here, actually. It's a little limited edition of Wild Wives and High Priest of California, a hardcover DOS chapbook style thing from very wonderful Research Press. So, but that's for another time. That's for when we do some more crime, so I'll stop waffling on about that. What you'll see then is some Colin Wilson. I'm a big Colin Wilson fan. I've read at least 70 of Colin's books, met him once. This is the Savoy Books edition of The Killer. Now, Savoy, of course, based in Manchester, amazing publisher. and it's got a Francis Bacon cover, as you can see, and you know it's a crime novel. But it's like a true crime book, and really, really good. And Savoy, they did some great stuff. You know, they had a little shop, and they used to sell sort of secondhand SF and comics and bootleg records and stuff. And they used to get raided all the time in the 70s and 80s by God's Cop James Anderton in Manchester. And you know, they end up in prison for publishing sort of wild comics, and they published things like The Gas by Charles Platt, the pornographic SF novel, which I think was Essex House in the USA. I may be wrong on that. They did Samuel R. Delaney's The Tides of Lust, later retitled and edited down as Equinox. Wasn't exactly edited, it was kind of rewritten, because there were some things in there which were deemed to cross the boundaries of the law. And you know, these guys even went to prison for their art, you know, and I love Savoy. They've just done some great stuff, you know, important publisher. Check out their website, Savoy Books, very, very important British avant-garde publisher, great stuff. But yeah, Colin Wilson. So this is the Spider-World series from the late 80s. There are 4 of these. The 4th one came a long time after, and I've never picked it up. And even though I love Colin's novels, these are not my favourites. I prefer his earlier SF novels. This is The Tower, and this is set in the future when sort of giant spiders rule the world, and they've got a kind of psionic power, and people live in the cracks of the walls. And this is great fun. I know Matt Defoe read this recently. I've not read it for years, and of course that's Chris Foss, and lovely. But I used to sell a lot of it. It was really popular. And these are out of order. Shocking. Look at that. This is volume 2, The Delta, and again a Foss jacket. And I have to say, I only really remember the mood of this. I've only read these once. I'll probably reread them one day, because I've read all of his novels. Some of them I've read, gosh, Ritual in the Dark I must have read 10 times. I've read The World of Violence many times. I've read his SF novels several times, the early ones. And here's the 3rd one, The Magician. By the time this came out, this was HarperCollins rather than Grafton. Grafton, of course, was HarperCollins. And again, and I can't remember much about this. There's quite a hiatus between the 2nd and 3rd. But, you know, it's a time when obviously everybody was trying to get their trilogies together in the late 80s. And they're really nice books, those. I do love Grafton, as you know. And really finishing off there, what you can see is a brace of books by one of my favourite writers, the very wonderful Chelsea Quinn Yarborough, who is just, you know, I think I've said before, if I ever met Chelsea, I'd probably faint, you know, because she's one of my idols. And I only got into these about 15 years ago, and this is a reprint. This is the Stealth Press edition of Hotel Transylvania, the first of her Saint Germain vampire novels. And Saint Germain was a real person. This is quite different to the others. I really like this. This came out about 76, 77, and she wrote initially 6 of them, but has gone on over the years to write about 30 altogether. And what she does, she picks a period of history, researches it thoroughly, and she drops her immortal vampire into them. And these, you know, these are not lightweight books. They've got real moral character, and you know, the historical research is just wonderful. And they can be quite quiet, so when something dramatic happens, it's really dramatic. But I love them, and they got me through some tough times. They're thoughtful things, you know, great thoughtful reads, and you know, very, very exciting as well. I absolutely love them. So that's some of the Royals. There will be some more hardcovers on the shelf below, which you're not seeing. I've got most of my limited, not all of them, and I'm going to do different videos about them. I've done a couple already which are sort of publisher based. I'll do some more which are just author based or on particular books, because they deserve a bit more attention. So there's a bit more of an insight into the Outlaw Booksellers collection. Hope you enjoyed that. At some point I've got to do B formats, and I have worked out a way of doing it, but it's going to involve carrying books up and down stairs. It's going to be a lot of work, so you might not see that for a while. But I don't want to tell you the idea I had. Some of you will laugh when you see it, but it might be a way off. Anyway, hope you enjoyed that. Please like, subscribe, comment, super thanks if you feel moved to do so, and you know, I'll show you some more of my little treasures again at some point. But I think we've done most of the hardcovers now. There's a lot more bits and pieces to come, and there's lots more paperbacks to come, and of course there's new acquisitions coming in all the time. So bye for now.